Hi, welcome back to Touchdown Nerdcast with Jordan, Frank, and Andrew. Today we are going to be talking about our own personal leagues draft, which happened on Sunday night, and some of our takeaways from that, and who we missed out on that we wish we could have gotten, and who we're maybe happy with who we got. In our league is called Two Yoked. I am the commissioner. Frank wishes he was the commissioner. Um, it is a keeper league that doesn't force values on the keepers. And then we do an auction style draft. So in some keeper leagues, it's like if you drafted them in the second round, you have to keep them for your second round pick, or you have to keep them for a pick earlier than, or a round earlier in which you drafted them previous season, right? There's rules like that concerning keepers. In our league, you get to keep up to 4 keepers. They're yours, no questions asked. And then we have a budget that's assigned based on the previous season's finish. But generally, you get $12 per open roster spot. So most people drafting have 10 open roster spots, and thus they have $120 of budget. Then, say you finished in 12th place, your roster would be 120 plus 12, so 132. If you finished in first, it would be 120 plus 1. So most people's salaries to spend at the auction or the salary draft is between 121 and 132. So take it away. Frank, what were the highlights of your draft?
Well, I was able to get back TJ Hawkinson. I was able to get Trevor Lawrence, who I'm big on this year. Um,
Great,
I
great pick.
redrafted a bunch of guys that I was unable to keep. Like I said, in Hawkinson and Isaiah Pacheco. And then I was able to snag George Pickens and a whole bunch of handcuffs that I'm really excited about, like Jalen Warren and Tajay Spears. Um, I think overall, I have probably the best roster I've ever seen personally. But yeah, so
Way to
pretty
be
excited
humble.
about it.
Way
What's
to
that?
be humble, Frank. What did
This
Yahoo rate?
this
What
that
did
was
Yahoo
me being
rate your
humble.
team? What did Yahoo rate your team?
They said I broke the scale, so no big deal.
D plus.
Frank loves
What? That's
himself
not
some
what they
Frank.
rated.
Frank
Everyone
loves
does.
himself for some Frank.
The only way my draft could have gone better is if I could have gotten Bijan Robinson for $2. It was just didn't happen. He ended up going for 87. So, oh well.
I should have paid 90 for him.
You should have. Thought you were going to.
I thought about it. I think Phil would have kept going higher though.
Oh, we already had some free agent pickups, huh?
Yep. Some
Somebody
reassessment
spent
of rosters.
$10.
Yep. Jordan, how did you feel about your draft?
I mean, considering the first year I did it with you, I had no idea what I was doing, and I feel like I did not have a good team. I felt like getting back in it, I didn't really have like I had some strategy to some of the things I wanted to do, and then kind of had to call audibles when it started. But overall, pretty happy. I don't know that I think depth wise at wide receiver, I think I'm okay. Would like to have a little bit more depth at running back. My initial strategy was to try to go big for Bijan and just be able to go with Bijan, Chubb, and Eckler, and just try to dominate the three running backs. Ultimately, I'm kind of happy I didn't wind up spending $90 for Bijan because I don't think I would have fulfilled the rest of my team the way that it is right now. So I think it worked out for the best. Um, I was happy to get Dallas Goddard for cheaper than what I thought he was going to go for as my tight end spot. Um, I think strength wise, I mean, I was happy to get Damian Pierce. I think I overpaid a little for Justin Herbert, but just banking on the fact that he's going to actually have a good year this year. Whereas I know Kyle overspent even more last year on Justin Herbert, and he did not have the year that I would have spent that kind of money for. So if he comes up with that year this year, I'll sit here the same thing next year saying I overspent on him. But ultimately, to me, the big question with quarterback was, do I go after like a Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, who have the chance to go big each week, or do I just wait until like the late round and sit on like a Jared Goff or something like that, or a Deshaun Watson? Ultimately, I don't think guys like that are going to consistently have big enough weeks that it was worth that strategy. So,
Just a stat correction: you actually paid more for Herbert this year than Kyle did last year, and we had less budget this year, so you spent more overall.
which I guess I'll be okay if he winds up quarterback top 5 fantasy points. I think it was worth it. If he falls outside that, I think it wasn't. I think it was easier to go big on a quarterback, pay a little for a tight end, just because when you're sitting there with like having Devontae Smith, Amari Cooper, and then Chubb and Eckler, obviously you have Chubb and Eckler who would have been top 10 picks in a normal redraft league. So it's like I felt comfortable being able to spend a little bit bigger in the quarterback tight end department, knowing that really all I needed to fill after that was 1 or 2 flex spots. So that kind of became the strategy. At first, it was just go big and sell out for Bijan, but I don't know what the rest of the team would have looked like if I would have done that.
Yeah. I think we all could have made a serious push for Bijan. Like you said, we would have just had holes all over the place instead of having studs like we have.
Well, we talked about it right after the draft. I don't think Phil's team is very good. I mean, he had the most money to spend, and he spent a ton on Bijan and then just kind of sat back and let everybody else get taken. And he wound up with a bunch of guys that, I mean, you leave $10 in your budget at the end, that $10 could have been spent. You don't
He had
get
$153 starting off, and yeah, he ended up with a bunch of Jags in a bad way. He should have used all his budget, just gone all in Bijan, and then just overpaid for some other studs just to, help round out his roster because he only had 2 keepers to begin with. So, I mean, yeah, he's got Joe Mixon, Justin Jefferson, and Bijan, but after that, it gets real murky. So, I mean, we'll see how Jordan Love treats him, but or if Tua can stay healthy.
Yeah.
He's got an okay roster, but he needs people to stay healthy. It's all.
I think if I was him, I would have spent bigger money on like a Justin Herbert or a Lamar Jackson type to pair with what he had already, and definitely would have gone bigger on like 1 or 2 of the wide receivers probably out there.
Yeah. How about you, Andy? Tell us a little bit about your favorite picks.
I mean, there was. I mean, I'm not ready to be done with talking about what you guys are talking about. I feel like I feel like you two drafted well, given your situation.
What is our situation, Dad?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, son. Neither of you guys had a QB or wide receiver or tight end. I mean, right?
Correct.
That we kept, yeah.
And as far as QBs available, I loved Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence as QBs, and those were the 2 QBs that you guys happened to get. And at good prices, and that's what you can do when you have solid keepers. You can spend money on those guys, whereas me, who had no running back, I had to spend $53 or whatever to get Jahmyr Gibbs.
I mean, not a bad get. We'll see
Yeah.
how he pans out.
Phil and Joe also had bad keepers, spent a lot of money to get running backs. So I feel like us 3 bottom dwellers spent our money to try to get top tier guys going into the future. And we had the budget to do so, and we went and did it. But I think you guys drafted appropriately with getting those 2 QBs. And I think you got like perfectly fine running backs that, like, Bijan might only put up 200 points this year. You don't know. And you drafted, like, Jordan, you got Dameon Pierce. Like he could put up the same amount of points as Bijan. Like we
for
don't
half the
know,
money.
or half the money.
I was
So
happy I got Dameon Pierce. I think, like you said, it's hard to find a running back in a redraft keeper like this, where most of the running backs, unless they're older, are going to get kept. Even the older ones, I feel like, are worth keeping. Like if you had like a LaDainian Tomlinson or a Priest Holmes, like when they were 30 or 29 or 30 years old, where you're like, do you keep them because they're older? I think if you know their production is going to be there, you have to. Like, because
right,
you saw the amount of money getting spent on running backs. I mean, there were a couple of running backs that went for money where I'm like Miles Sanders. I don't know that there was no way I was ever spending the money that he went for. Like Dameon Pierce, I thought I was going to have to spend more for. So getting him for what I wound up getting him for, I thought was a good pickup just because he is keepable with his age. And hopefully that system will be a little bit better with taking Stroud and getting a new coach and having some high draft picks. But like you said, Bijan is the same spot. He's a young, unproven, flashy guy that is splitting carries with a bunch of guys possibly in that backfield. And right now, Dameon Pierce has Devin Singletary as his only competition.
yep.
So
And he was on a
Now,
bad
Jordan,
Houston team last year, and he did great even on a bad team last year. So
can you compare Miles Sanders to Damian Pierce? Who would you rather have?
I'd much rather have Pierce.
And you spent less for him than Miles Sanders. It was $1 less, but just about the same. But either way, you got your guy. I know I wanted him too. I just couldn't afford him.
Yeah.
Now with my game plan, I needed to. I went heavy on the tight end and the quarterback. I spent $54 between those two positions for my starters, not counting the bench guys. Um,
right,
so I
which
had
is a
to
good
be
strategy for you
frugal the
guys.
rest of the way.
That's a good
Yeah,
strategy for you guys because then all you have left to do is fill flex.
Well, and I think that's something that like right away when I was able to land, I was like with Frank, get a quarterback, get a tight end, and then get the best usable flex player I could get. And I think that's what I did with going Goddard, Herbert, and Pierce. And then I was able to snag a bunch of guys like the Deontay Johnson, Cortland Suttons, like Nico Collins, guys that I think could have good years. And I'm just hoping one of them does well enough to be the weekly flex, especially come playoff time. Like I feel strong about the 8 starters I have once bye weeks are done. Um, so that was kind of my plan is sell out 90%, 85% of my budget for those 4 starting positions and then worry about filling in after that.
do
Same.
you have any regrets in keepers or guys that you maybe could have spent an extra $2 on and would have liked better?
I would have liked to spend one more dollar if that would have landed me Drake London.
Yeah, Drake
I thought
London.
he went for less. I think it's more like in an auction draft. Like I can't remember all the guys, but like when you're sitting there with your budget capped because you can't spend a certain amount, there were guys obviously later in the draft that I would have liked to get for the price they went for. But again, knowing that some people had like $60 left and you're sitting there with like 17, it's like obviously guys were going for cheaper than they probably should have at the end just because certain people had money and certain people did not.
Mhm.
Um, I think honestly, like the most, I was telling Andy before we got on this, like you taking freaking Tank Bigsby. That's the guy I wanted for $1, but you bet $1 on him to auction him up, and I had no money to go back over the top with it. So it's like Frank's just gonna get him for $1 unless somebody else that's got like $8 left wanted to go higher with you.
Right. I was able to fill out Tajay Spears, Jalen Warren, and Tank Bigsby, all backup running backs, but all good handcuffs for a total of $5. So
Yeah,
that was
that's
big
pretty
for
good.
me. Now I'm just hoping for injuries. Hate to say it, but I am.
And they will happen.
I know I had one regret, and that was, at the end of the draft, I wish I'd kept Jerry Judy over Javonte Williams. Um, I think he's just going to be the safer play, and he was a stud down the stretch last year. So I think Andy got a good pickup with that. Yeah, you had to spend $38, but I think that was a worthwhile gamble.
I really like Jerry Judy too.
Yeah. Do you guys know what the average value of your first 3 draft picks was? Mine
Uh,
was like 39.40.
my
But
first three was about 27.
that left you a lot of extra budget to
No, that killed my budget. Well, then I
compared
spent
to me.
26, 28, 26, 19, and 20. And that ate all my budget. And then from there on, I could only max bet $3. So, yeah, I
You
was
got
able to
you
get
got
some
you got
depth with
five
Christian Kirk
players.
and George Pickens. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm excited about Pickens this year. He looks phenomenal, making crazy catches and things like that. And Christian Kirk, I'll be honest, Christian Kirk, I wasn't hoping to get. I just, I was trying to bid him up, and I ended up getting him. But it's not too bad since I have Trevor Lawrence.
Yep.
Hopefully, there'll be a decent stack.
So
I
yeah,
think it was
you were able
I
to
think it
get
was
five
nice. Like
players at a
I mean, I
decent
went
rate.
41 and 39 for Pierce and Herberts, or 40 each essentially, and then 20 and 14 for Deontay Johnson and Dallas Goedert.
Yep.
Like I was pretty happy with that. I mean, I think like Frank can probably attest to this because wasn't he on your team last year? Cortland Sutton went for like what, 30 or $40 last year, and I got him for 4 this year.
Yeah, I had him 2 years ago, but
I feel like he has to have a better year this year, and if he doesn't, whatever, I spent $4 on him. Like him, Nico Collins, and Deontay Johnson are kind of I need one of those three to hopefully step into the flex spot.
yeah, I think your safest bet there is Deontay Johnson, just because you got a second-year quarterback instead of you never know what Stroud's going to do, and Sutton's got a decent shot, but we got to see if Russell Wilson's still got stuff in the tank, which I think he's going to have a bounce back year myself. Um, Actually, I think he's still a free agent in our league, but
And it's hard to have a year that bad. I think Deontay Johnson was a great pickup to have the horrible year that he had, yet still have like 150 targets. He could easily,
Well, and he had
haul in more touchdowns.
He had 0 touchdowns.
More
it's like
receptions.
They said somebody said like if he would have had 5 touchdowns, he all of a sudden would have been in top 20 wide receiver territory with fantasy points. Like,
Yep. Those are all good picks, and it just goes to show, like I spent a lot at the beginning to get the top tier players, and I ran out of budget in 3 players. Jordan, you made it like 4 players. Frank made it 5 players before you were kind of cash strapped.
I think you have to do that though. Like if you have confidence in your 4 keepers, you have to spend big early. I think that's what screwed me the first year drafting when you did this league, was the fact that it's like I waited back like Phil did, like, well, I'll just use all my money at the end. But then you have guys that you're like, I don't even need that money because my $8 is going to buy that guy. I didn't need $20 left to buy that guy. So that was a big thing that I was like, I have to make sure I change that this year. Is like, I'm going to spend on who I want to at least fill my starter spots. As long as that doesn't bankrupt me and only allow me $1 per player for every bench spot, I felt okay about it.
Yep. And I think finding a happy medium is the best way. I wasn't able to do it this year, but spend big early on 1 or 2 guys where you still leave yourself a little buffer where you're not stuck betting $1 on a player, but maybe around $5, so that as the prices, everyone spends over budget early on, everyone goes late for cheaper than they should. So if you leave yourself some buffer, you're not stuck just getting whatever you can get with $1 or 2. You'll be able to, bully your way a little bit to get some of these underpriced guys. I think is definitely the best way to build depth. Like I said, I just wasn't able to do it this year because I really wanted George Pickens. So otherwise, that was my plan.
I think you guys both had good drafts. I'm looking at like a couple guys that I wish I would have gotten. But the price just went more than I could afford. Number 1 was Darren Waller.
Mm-hmm.
I think tight end is a position that Daniel Jones can actually throw accurately to. And the wide receivers in New York are horrible. so I liked his upside, and I liked the tight end can go in my flex spot. There goes Jordan. I'm gonna mute him temporarily.
Yeah. He's back.
All right.
I'm back. Had to let the dog in.
So Darren Waller, I thought would have been an interesting pick because he can fit into your flex spot. And then since I had Kyle Pitts and I don't know that I trust him yet, that would have been a nice insurance policy for me.
Yeah, I'm big on Waller this year. That
But
would have been nice.
$34 was way too much.
I wasn't spending
Especially when you have
34.
Daniel Jones.
I wasn't spending 34 on a guy where their quarterback is barely going to throw for 3,000 yards.
Yeah, it was insane. The other guy that, looking back at the draft, who went for a decent value that I felt like I could have grabbed was Brian Robinson. And then another one would be, I guess, Kenneth Gainwell with the news out of Philadelphia that backfield is a mess. Because I am weak at running back, and to see Kenneth Gainwell go for $3 and Brian Robinson go for $6.
That was the part of the
It would have
draft
been
where
nice.
everybody was starting to run out of money because I thought about taking a shot at both too, but I just didn't have the money left to do it.
Yep.
I had Brian Robinson as my pass to pass on him. He just didn't look phenomenal after he came back from his injuries last year, and with their unknown quarterback play, I didn't want to.
Yeah,
I was going to let somebody else take the game.
That's exactly what happened. Because you see, I took James Cook immediately after that. Khalil Herbert went immediately after that. Yeah.
Both of those
but
guys.
When you look at that price tag, you're like, oh, like if $7 would have won it, like,
Yep.
or if $4 would have won me at like a potential starting running back, that would have been huge.
Yeah, I agree.
Something interesting I found about the draft.
Go for
it. I had 5 picks in the first 33, and then I was out of money, and I didn't pick again. I didn't win another auction until 105th when I won back to back, and then it was just I had so many guys just go back to back to back at the end there, just because by then everyone else was out of money. Anywho.
Yeah.
What's your team name? Pump. That's right.
I had enough money to get Mooney for $3. It kind of seems pathetic at that point.
Yeah, but he's still gonna give you, at least 750 yards and a handful of touchdowns. I mean, for $3, you can't beat that. I think he's got a good floor, and he's got a ceiling of at least 1,000 yards. So,
right, ceiling of 1,000, floor 700 maybe. Felt good about it. Should be the number 2 target there.
That's how I felt about like some of the guys like Deontay Johnson for 14 and Cortland Sutton for 4 and Nico Collins for $2. I mean, I hope that one of those guys has a productive year and then it's worth it.
Yeah.
We got Zay Flowers for $5.
He looked good last night.
So that's like, we talk about filling out your rosters. So we're starting 8 players in our league on a week-to-week basis. And we each kept 4 players. So that means you needed to fill 4 starting roster spots. So I filled 3 of my 4 roster spots with an average value of like $39.5. That left me 1 roster spot left. So looking at my final flex player, I'm looking at Mooney versus Zay Flowers. Do I wish I had your guys' rosters and I had somebody better? I do. There's some good names out there, but I just did not have the budget to do it. On your guys' teams, who is your final starter? Who's the last person you flex in?
Mine was Deontay Johnson.
He's your number 8.
Yeah. So, I mean, I felt comfortable with that because I think he is a target monster and hopefully will have a better year and find the end zone a couple times. But like I said, I knew I was going to be able to steal guys like a Romeo Dobbs, Nico Collins, Jacoby Myers, Cortland Sutton, like guys that are kind of in that tier or could be in that tier this year. And you just hope one of them out of 4 options or 5 options puts up weekly numbers where it's like, okay, that's going to be my 8th starter every week. But
yeah,
we'll see who that winds up being.
I'm all about having a guy. I don't care about having like a good floor or like consistency, but a guy who like is going to get targets, is going to get touchdowns, because that'll pop and make you win weeks. Frank, who's your 8th spot?
I think it'll depend. It'll be a matchup basis because I got one guy on my bench who's starting caliber, I would say, on most teams. So my last 3 are Isaiah Pacheco, Christian Kirk, and George Pickens. And like I said, I think it'll just have to depend on matchup.
That's in your 8th spot?
Well, the 2 of the 3 will go in my 7 and 8, the 2 flex spots.
Yeah, I want you to narrow it down more. You have to pick just the 8th spot. 7th is locked in.
All right, I think I'm more excited about George Pickens than
So
Christian Kirk. We'll see.
So both of you guys are banking on Steelers wide receivers number 1 and 2.
Yeah, and I like Christian Kirk better than Deontay. So here we are. I think he's got a shot to really flash.
I like
Deontay.
Christian Kirk. I just think there's way too many weapons in Jacksonville.
Yeah. I think they're both unique situations. Christian Kirk went from being number 1 to number 2. Pittsburgh, they really, I don't know how they got away with the winning record, but they're definitely going through some growing pains in Pittsburgh. I think if the accuracy can improve for Pickett, both Pickens and Deontay Johnson will have fantasy relevant seasons.
I think you look at Pittsburgh and I look at your weapons really are just Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Najee Harris.
I mean, they got Pat Freiermuth, they got Allen Robinson, they got a lot of talent there. Even Jalen Warren's looking good in his 2nd year. So, to me, there's a lot of mouths to feed there too.
Yeah. I don't know. I just don't think that. I think that Trevor Lawrence was more of a spread the ball out type of guy last year, and a young quarterback in Pickett was more. I'm looking for my 2 wideouts and handing the ball off. I think Freiermuth had his couple weeks where he was a target, and then other weeks where he was completely non-existent. I think Evan Ingram was heavily utilized from Lawrence's thing, and with having Travis Etienne, and then you got Kirk, Zay Jones, and Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley is going to have a huge year.
I do too.
And I think that the Jags are just in an easier division right now than the Steelers.
That's for sure.
But hopefully that means that the Steelers are maybe playing from behind and throwing the ball to your 2 guys.
Yeah, a lot of it will depend on just how good some of these teams are. I mean, I think my Damian Pierce is 100% banking that Houston's better than they were last year. I mean, those were the games he got completely taken out of the game, was when they're losing 30-0 at halftime.
Yeah. Game script's going to play a lot this season for some of our guys.
Any
How do you
other
feel
news
about one of
from
the shortest
the
player
weekend?
in the league?
Shortest. Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce Vaughn. I think he's got a shot to at least, contribute. I don't know how much he's going to contribute, but
I like Deuce Vaughn.
It was Darren Sproles. Was that the?
Darren Sproles was a little guy too.
Was Darren Sproles even taller than Deuce Vaughn?
By like an inch.
5'6", and Deuce Vaughn is 5'5". I mean, if Deuce Vaughn has a career that's like Darren Sproles, I mean, that'll pay off big time, especially for bye weeks. Just be like, boop, pop you in there. Just break off a big run, catch some passes. I think when you're that little behind like 6'8" linemen, like I feel like they lose you. Like, where is this guy in the backfield?
Yeah.
Problem is that if a linebacker gets a hold of him, just one body slam and break his whole body and just be done for the rest of his career.
True.
Just pick him up and toss him to the ground. That's what I'm worried about with Bryce Young too.
Deuce
Like,
Vaughn's the second shortest player in history.
is he?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you see like the, like Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen like break out of like would-be sacks. They're like, yeah, no, I'm ripping out of this. Justin Fields rips out of like a sack. I feel like Bryce Young, like somebody's just gonna get like one hand on him and be like, "You're mine.
Yep.
You're not going anywhere."
Yeah.
I like it.
Awesome. Well, we'll call it a wrap for today's show. You can catch us where you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. We'll get some other channels going on some other streaming platforms pretty soon. But thank you for listening, Touchdown Nerdcast, and until next time, say bye, Jordan.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Jordan.
Bye, Jordan.
Bye,
Bye,
Jordan.
Frank.